you want to get more from your dye inks? Have you tried to paint with them? Well, today I'm showing you how to paint with dye inks whilst creating this elegant wedding card using the new 1+1 release from Polka Designs. It's Verity here on my YouTube channel and blog, Pretty Little Button. If you're new here, I make paper crafting tutorials for the everyday crafter. For this card, I'm using the This Calls for Cake stamp and die set, which is a lovely large decorative cake perfect for a wedding, but you can easily use it for a sophisticated stylish birthday card too. Just change the sentiment up. Now, to make it easier as we want to paint with this cake, we are going to heat emboss the cake first. So I'm placing a piece of Polka Designs premium white cardstock into my misti stamping platform. You can use watercolour card if you prefer, but I'm not planning on using a lot of water later on, so this cardstock can handle the small amount of moisture I'm going to be adding. I'm inking this up with Wow Clear Ultra Slow Drying Embossing ink, and I'm doing this a couple of times just to make sure I get a good coverage before I'm covering this in Wow Metallic Gold embossing powder. As you melt the powder, the gold embossing just emphasises the elegance of this cake, don't you just think? So before I move on, I'm also using one of the sentiments from the stamp set, Just Married, and positioning this script sentiment at an angle in the middle of the cake, and it fits perfectly. Again, I'm stamping this in embossing ink and covering it in the same gold embossing powder before I'm heat setting it. So this stamp set comes with a coordinating die set, and I'm positioning the die over the heat embossed image and using some purple tape just to keep it in place before I run this through my die cutting machine just off screen. Okay, so now let's get to painting with our dye inks. I have a folder with my ink swatches in, which is a great way to see the colour of inks and choose what colours I want to use and how well they go together. I have them in a folder as I also store my ink blending foam pads for each ink colour in there as well, and it just helps keep it all nice and organised. So for the colours, I'm using Rose Petals, Peppermint Scrub, Eucalyptus and Spruce. These all come from the Polka Designs Spa collection, so you know that these colours are going to go well together. So to use the ink to paint with, if you only got the ink pads and no refills, the way to do this is to smoosh your ink pad down onto an acrylic block. The acrylic block acts a bit like as a palette for your inks. This provides a small pool of ink for you to dip your brush into and then to paint with it. So I started adding rose petals to the largest floral and then decided I wanted to dilute this slightly with water because I wanted it a touch paler on the card. If you're using regular cardstock like I am rather than watercolour, just be mindful about how much water you do add to your card. Obviously your card will only take so much water before it starts to peel and warp. So I'm adding the ink to the flower all over before I'm then going in with undiluted ink to the base of the petals to add more definition and shadows. If you're not a great painter, then don't worry because the heat embossing reduces the chance of the ink moving outside of the areas you're wishing to paint. For the florals, I'm using a combination of rose petals and peppermint scrub to colour them in, usually using the peppermint scrub to add more depth to the shadows. For the leaves, I'm not diluting the ink as much as the areas of the leaves are much smaller, therefore shading isn't quite as important in the smaller areas, and I'm using the 2 shades of green to colour different parts of the foliage in. Okay, so for the rest of the card, I wanted to add some texture and interest, but at the same time not distract from that cake we've just coloured. So for this, I'm using the polka dot cover plate die from the new release, and I've got a piece of white cardstock trimmed down to 5.5 by 4.25 inches. I'm using some purple tape to keep this in place as I run it through my die cutting machine. When I place this over a white card base, you get a nice tone-on-tone look for the cake to sit on, giving it some interest but not distracting from that cake. I decided though I wanted to trim it down just 1/4 inch because I wanted a white frame around the background. Now I used quite a few white foam pads to place on the back of the die cut to prop this up for some dimension. But if you don't have time or you find this too tedious, then just adhere it straight down without any dimension. I don't mind doing this as I quite like the look it gives it at the end of it. I also foam mounted the cake itself onto the middle of the card just to allow it to stand out more, and as we've already done the sentiment, all that's left is to embellish this card. So for the sequins on this card, I'm using the Flamenco Bay sequin mix. This has a lovely range of pink sequins in different shades, sizes and shapes, as well as a few beads, so this sequin mix would also be great for shaker cards. I'm using my quick sticks tool to pick up the sequins and apply some liquid glue before adhering them down. I find for a more appealing look on the eye, I tend to cluster them in 3 groups around the card, trying to make a triangle that focuses the eye on the main image of the card. Although this card is a wedding card, the cake from This Calls the Cake stamp set and die would also make beautiful, elegant birthday cards as well. What's more, I just love this polka dot cover plate die. This die can be used in so many projects with such a simple design, and I know I'll be using it a lot. It will become a staple die in my collection. Links to the supplies used in today's card are listed below as well as on my blog, and this new release is being featured throughout the week with Catherine Paula. If you enjoyed today's videos, please give it a thumbs up and why not subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to be notified when the next video is up. Until next time, happy crafting!